I, like anyone else, or like a lot of New Yorkers, thought that there was a Brooklyn accent or a Bronx accent, just because everyone said so. So I went along with it, and I didn't really know anything about New York accents, except I knew one when I heard one, but I didn't know what type it was. So yeah, it wasn't until I met Sam Schwa, who's the dialect coach that I have in the film, that he was the one who told me that no, it's not necessarily geographic, it's more ethnic, like Italian, Irish, Jewish, Puerto Rican, that kind of thing. The Irish New York accent is one that is most famous with Jimmy Cagney.
I didn't ask you for any lip. I asked you if you had a drink.
Archie Bunker, even though his character wasn't Irish, he was very symbolic of sort of white, non-Italian working class.
Listen to the meat-headed college boy over there.
And their accent tends, while the Italian one is very like chest heavy, the Irish tends to be more nasal. It also is very fast. I said it's like Tommy gun kind, very rat-a-tat-tat.
I don't get that dough in 3 minutes. Face is going to be splashed all over the best hideout in town.
I think of it as they also use sort of maybe different slang. Now this is going way, way back, but you think of like simoleons for money, Leo Gorcey and the Dead End Kids, Amoidalize you.
Unaccustomed as I am to making those speeches, a thing like this leaves me kind of wordless. Makes me realize how much I ignored my vocabulation when I was a kid.
I think when people think of like street urchins, newsies, sort of old-timey New York, that the Irish New York accent is what they're thinking of.
That's my cigar. You'll steal another.
Hey, bummers, we got work to do.
Whereas opposed to from the 70s and beyond, when all the movies about The Godfather and that sort of mystique took off, then it's the Italian. When people think of New York accents now, it's the Italian one they're thinking of. And I think that also has a lot to do with the fact that the Irish as a culture are much more assimilated now than they were, 50 years ago, definitely 100 years ago, where they had their own specific ethnic enclaves. So I think the Irish New York accent, although it still remains and you still hear it definitely in Irish neighborhoods, is one that is possibly not as, is more thought of as old-fashioned, old-timey New York. The whole New York accent really, I think, began with people striving to sound English. English at the time was thought of as the ultimate, the aristocratic goal, for instance. You'll hear it, not so much anymore. Actually, that's the accent that's really died out, the very upper crust New York, blue blood. You think of the Roosevelts and the Rockefellers and that kind. When Roosevelt said, we have nothing left to fear but fear itself.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The way he said fear, the fear, was that dropped R, like that's in British English, but it's very affected, and it's something that you don't hear very much because it's almost laughable now. It's like Thurston Howell. But the New York accent has a lot of those same qualities, and what they think is that it was sort of people striving to sound upper class, even though they weren't, putting on airs, so to speak, and not quite succeeding. Rudy Giuliani is a perfect example of someone who is Italian. His grandparents were from Italy or Sicily, I don't know where, so he's a grandson of immigrants, but his accent is Irish.
So one of the things that we're going to add to this to get everyone's attention is something that we're legally entitled to do, and it's a perfectly appropriate time to do it, and that is that we're going to take your cab.
He grew up in Garden City, Long Island, the Irish neighborhood, so he has that nasal kind of sound that you hear in Irish New York accents. So he doesn't sound like a De Niro or a Pacino or a Pesci or any of those, because he didn't grow up around them so much, even though his parents probably did. You develop an accent to fit in with your peer group. I mentioned earlier about Archie Bunker and All in the Family, and I think the accent has changed a lot in that the stereotypical D's, dem, does, toity, toid, and toid, you really don't hear that anymore. You will hear it with some old-timers. but you by and large don't hear that. That's a relic from the past. And I think it All in the Family had a lot to do with that, in that it brought New York culture to, you know, across the country. People got made fun of for their accents. People felt badly about them. People really tried to, or people became self-aware about it. So then tried to kind of shift the way they spoke. That's the way people speak. That's the way they really are. It's not just an affect for the screen. And so people, even tough guys, get a little hurt. I think that they're being made fun of. And so that also colors the way that accent evolves and changes too.